Hello and welcome to Cutting Through. I'm Mitchell Plitnick. Wanted to record a quick video tonight. It is Election Day 2025, a weird election day for me, since in my county in Maryland there was nothing for me to vote on. So no polls for me today, but there were certainly races I was watching, especially the mayoral race in New York City, my hometown, and well, that just went as well as I could have possibly hoped. Zohran Mamdani won that election, and I mean, this is just an enormous victory tonight. It is a huge victory for all of us. I put out a statement almost immediately, but I wanted to do something a bit more, I guess we could call it a bit more analytical in this video. Talk about some of the implications of the election and what it really means. I mean, I think one of the brightest and most hopeful points of this election is that this was an absolute clear message that racism is not going to win. It is not going to win votes, and I think that is a change, frankly, from years past. Of course, New York City in many ways is, I think, a really great sort of testing site for this. On the one hand, we know New York is a relatively liberal city on the whole, but New York has so many generations and so many communities and so many people coming together. I think in many ways New York can be seen as a measuring stick. And it's certainly not the only city you could say this about. I mean, most big cities, are big melting pots of lots of different political ideologies. But New York, in particular, I think, can react in strong ways. We've seen New York elect mayors, this century even, um, who are quite reactionary. Rudy Giuliani was, of course, mayor of New York. Mike Bloomberg, people who, are really everything we're standing against. And it's not an easy place for frankly, a Muslim, progressive, and outspoken candidate to win. Throughout this campaign, there were a lot of, I did hear occasionally people talk about Mamdani and say, couldn't he maybe just, what if he toned down on this subject or that subject? And I couldn't help but sort of think about it as the Jackie Robinson approach in many ways. Jackie Robinson was this, really, really courageous man, but the thing that impressed the white people who decided to make him the first black major league player was that they felt that he could withstand the insults and not get into, shouting matches back and forth and fights and whatever. And that worked in its way, and that was fine in 1947. It's not 1947 anymore. And it's time to take on a lot of these issues much more forcefully. And I think that is what Mamdani did. The way I put it in my statement was that this is a victory for people. It is a victory for people who have a diverse, cosmopolitan, and I'm going to use the word globalist vision for New York City. Um, that has become this weird anti-Semitic code word, or for some people, simply a word for the sort of mysterious or liberal elites. Um, you know, I believe in globalism. I believe in a unified world. I believe that the best thing that could ever happen to this planet is for us to all come together, take down borders, take down the things that are separating us, and instead emphasize our common humanity, to take care of one another and to care for one another. And we see this in major cities around the world in many ways, and in many places, not just the United States and not just New York City, but New York City is a wonderful example of that. New York City is a globalist city. It is a city where, whether it's cuisine, whether it's other expressions of culture, you can see people from so many different walks of life. That's what New York's about. And I think that's what Zohran Mamdani was celebrating, not a melting pot. It's not a melting pot. It is a city that literally sticks up its middle finger when Trump and his maggots go and attack diversity, equity, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, DEI. Uh, I think the other part of this was a huge victory, and on a more, I guess, for me personal level, because it was a huge victory for the New York Jewish community that sees its security, its safety, and its soul, the future of its soul, as being wrapped up in struggles for progressive change and in struggles against racism and struggles against hate. Um, there are two very active segments of the Jewish community in this race. I mean, there are many segments of the Jewish community, but there were two that were active, and one peddled fear and continues to takes support for Palestine as not only hatred of Israel but hatred of Jews. um, Takes any expression of solidarity, not just of solidarity, but literally goes so far as to take anti-racism and to calls for justice and calls against genocide and calls for human rights and international law and all of those things, turns those into expressions of anti-Semitism. That is who was supporting Andrew Cuomo in this race. And I'm sorry for those of you who don't neatly fit into those categories, and yet we're still so afraid of Mamdani, who and therefore did support Cuomo. Um, but there's another, and I think this is the growing sector of the Jewish community. This is the younger sector of the Jewish community. This is the Jewish community that, ironically, isn't just idealistic, but is actually returning to the heart and soul of Judaism as it has been in the last couple of centuries, as a progressive movement, as an enlightenment movement, as a movement that tries to make the world better and recognizes that it can't be better for Jews unless it's better for everyone else, for other oppressed groups. That's who supported Zohran Mamdani, and there's a hell of a lot of us. And I'm the old guard in that. The big numbers are the younger people. And that's the Jews, that's the Jewish community that's coming. And the old Jewish community that, immediately, I mean, perfect example. Jonathan Greenblatt of the Anti-Defamation League took days to say anything about the Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes um, interview, and the blatant anti-Semitism that was being thrown out there, the vile hatred of Jews. Took days for him to say anything about that. Immediately after Mamdani's victory today, he put out this, well, we're going to have our eye on him, and we're going to be on top of him, and we're going to be, because he has such a long history of anti-Semitism. He doesn't. He does have a history of objecting to Israeli crimes, and he does have a history of treating Palestinians as human beings. And that is what Jonathan Greenblatt considers anti-Semitism. That generation is dying. And it's going to be replaced by a generation of Jews that want to link arms with other oppressed peoples, that want to stand up and fight for a better world where it isn't us or them, where it isn't us versus them, where it is all of us standing together against the few who are robbing us blind and keeping us at each other's throats. So there was that. I also thought there was a great um, uh, I don't want to call it an irony necessarily, but a nice coincidence maybe it just was, that upon the death of former Vice President Dick Cheney, Kamala Harris decided to show us everything that is wrong with the Democratic Party. She put out a statement praising Cheney and what a hero he was and how much he loved his country and he gave so much for his country. I mean, this is a man who is a major war criminal, even by American standards. This is a man who launched an invasion by lying to the American people, and to Congress. This is a man who arranged for lies to the United Nations to get support for his war of choice on Iraq. And he did this to enrich himself. to enrich corporations that he had a hand in and to advance his ideological agenda. This is a man responsible for literally millions of deaths. That's who Kamala Harris embraces. And on that same day, Zohran Mamdani, who weathers all the vile shit that has been thrown at him because he believes Palestinians are human beings, because he's not afraid to say so, and because he's not afraid to stand up on a whole host of other issues and tell people, yeah, everyone deserves to be able to eat. Everyone deserves a roof over their head, and everyone deserves to be treated decently like a human being. And the things that are therefore said about him, the way that Andrew Cuomo talked about how he would how making jokes about how Mamdani would aid and abet terrorist attacks on New York if he was mayor. I mean, this is what we were hearing. The Cuomo campaign was putting out the most vile hate against Mamdani as a Muslim and fomenting hate against Muslims. Not to mention the classic anti-Semitic trope of this Islamic anti-Semitism, which you can look this up. I wrote an entire report about with Professor Sahar Aziz, which I will link to in the comments. But that is what we're fighting against, and that lost tonight. That sort of racism lost tonight. Zohran Mamdani led the fight against it. And he led the fight against the Democratic Party that is in league with that, whether it's Andrew Cuomo. Yeah, he ran as an independent, but first he was running in the Democratic primary. And as I put on social media a day or two ago, if you want to know what Islamophobia means, just look at the fact that you basically had this two-man race between Cuomo and Mamdani. And the choice was between a man who was a serial sexual assaulter and who, as governor, enriched himself through the deaths of thousands of New Yorkers from COVID. That's what Cuomo did. But the panic that was being manufactured was around the Muslim guy. That's what we call Islamophobia. And it was undeniable here. And it lost. It lost. Um, there are many policy ideas that I think are wonderful ideas that Mamdani is putting through in order to make New York City affordable again. Um, and they are not going to be easy to implement because the knives, as I say, will be out for Mamdani. They will be out from not only Republicans or right-leaning independents and libertarians, but also from Democrats who want him to fail very, very badly. They do not want to see a populist candidate who speaks to and for the people succeed in this role. They will do everything they can to undermine him. So he will need an awful lot of support. But Mamdani got to this job because he preached a politics of hope. When Kamala Harris campaigned on her campaign of joy and her politics of joy, what joy? She's up there dancing around. Sure, she's wealthy. People can't feed their kids. People can't pay their rent. She was offering no solutions to any of that. People don't want their tax dollars to go to genocide. And she said that she wouldn't change a thing as far as that went, even though her constituents were telling her to change that stance, both for moral reasons and for strategic ones in terms of winning the election. She wouldn't do it. Mamdani weathered slings and arrows all over the place because he did say that he will not support genocide and reminded people that in any case, it's not his job as mayor of New York. So, this is where, this is where that sort of thing lands. Mamdani won because he told people that he felt their pain, he heard what they were going through, and he had ideas to address it. Mainstream centrist Democrats, people like Harris or people like Chuck Schumer, who refused to endorse Mamdani even though he was the Democratic nominee for in this race, They don't offer answers. They say, oh no, it's all the Republicans' fault. It's the Republicans' fault. Well, what are you going to do differently? Nothing. What did you do differently when you had both houses of Congress and the presidency? Nothing. You did the same thing. You um, you did not help people. You did not reduce income inequality. Oh, there were positive economic markers. Yes, there were. You know, um, but when people dug deeper, as I did, and you can look this up in the archives on my site, but because when people dug deeper and looked into the numbers and what they meant and relative to pre-pandemic and is it okay, there's greater income, but is that being distributed evenly, or are poor people still struggling? Or did we put in a fix that we knew was going to expire, as Joe Biden did with the child tax credit, and did not push for its becoming permanent or even renewed? You know, they were playing people. And then they would turn around and tell the voters, well, you just don't understand economics. It was appalling. And people know better because they know they're suffering. They know they can't pay their rent. They know they can't buy food. They know they can't afford their bills. So people know, and you're telling them essentially that what they're going through isn't real. That was Harris's strategy, to try to convince people that what was happening to them was just all in their imaginations and that they were really very well off while they're struggling to pay their rent and feed their kids. Mamdani didn't do that. He has some very bold initiatives. Maybe they will work. They will face serious obstacles because people want him to fail. And we need to support him in these efforts. But if he succeeds even in some of them, it's going to matter a great deal. And it's going to inspire people around the country because, you see this in one election after another. People vote for change. That is what has been going on for many, many election cycles now. People are not trying to bring back what has been. They don't want to go back. They don't want to go back to something that was 20 years ago, unless you're selling them on a 20 years ago that never existed in the first place, the way Donald Trump does. But Democrats can't do that because the Democratic voters remember what it was like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and it sucked. And they don't want to go back to that. They don't want the Clinton solutions. They don't want Republican light. They want their lives to be better. And uh, and I think that if Mamdani succeeds, we will see that success as a blueprint for other places. Now, as right now, as many of us, revel in this, it's important to look around and see Democrats are winning everywhere, and it's not just progressive Democrats by any stretch. In fact, the more progressive candidate in Minneapolis lost, Amar Fatah. He lost, and it was very clear defeat. You see gubernatorial races in New Jersey and Virginia that went to very, very centrist Democrats. And one could argue it's that a one size fits all uh, solution, like saying, well, progressives should campaign everywhere because as we see in New York, they will win. Well, of course, different places are different. Virginia is not like New York City. That is true. But what we've seen, and especially, and I think Virginia is a great example, we see Virginia go back and forth to, these sort of far right Democrats, far right Republicans, centrist Democrats, and they keep switching because neither one of them is making their lives better. And if those people see that a progressive Democrat does succeed in making people's lives better, well, uh, things might be different in a place like Virginia as well. Um, I think there's no question that if the Democratic Party came together and supported Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, fine. Support what she's going to try to do in Virginia. She's a very centrist Democrat. And also supported Mamdani in New York. And then let people see what do they like. If real, substantive change comes in New York, I think we'll see progressive candidates running in Virginia and picking up steam in places like that, and even places much more conservative. I think we'll see it in many places all over the country, places that go for Trump. I think, one of the ways that Mamdani really kickstarted his own campaign was by going to places in the five boroughs where people voted for Trump. And he wasn't going to these affluent suburbs. He was going to places in the Bronx. He was going to all sorts of neighborhoods. You can see the videos. He's talking to regular people, people of color, people, working people, poor people. And they said, well, I voted for Trump. I voted for Trump. And he would talk to them and he would explain, his view. He didn't rag on them for voting for Trump. He understood that they voted for Trump because they didn't like what was, they were struggling under the Democrats. They were struggling under Biden, so they voted for Trump. Just something different, something else. That's the other option. Now, if you show them that there's an option that will really work for them, I think you'll get loyalty out of that for many years to come. This is the kind of thing that we've been pushing, progressives have been pushing in the Democratic Party for a long time. I think it'll work. It really hasn't been tried yet. And maybe Mamdani will help, give it a legitimate shot. So anyway, I'll sign off with that for now. Um, just with the last thought of I really I was literally crying for a while after the victory. And it's been so long since there's been a substantial progressive victories that really meant something. It's been years, and we needed it very, very badly, considering how horribly things have been going in 2025. So I just want to thank everybody who worked on the Mamdani campaign and brought this hope to life, including Mamdani himself, and including many friends and colleagues of mine who worked in New York City to help this happen. And yeah, it means a lot well beyond the five boroughs. And I wish I was, New York's still my favorite place. It's where I grew up, and I wish I was there to be with you to celebrate this. But going forward, you're an inspiration. Thank you all so much.